I want to bring in Mark Cancian. He's a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and a retired United States Marine colonel. Colonel, thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the show.
So let me ask you about your initial reaction to the defense secretary's comments about the strikes in Iran, the president's use of the language obliterated, rejecting the initial intelligence briefings based on what he thinks, because he keeps saying, I think this is what happened. I think that they're wrong. I think this is what happened. How should we take all that?
Well, Secretary Hegseth was emphatic about what a success the operation was because of its complexity, because the United States is the only country in the world that could do this, and in that he was correct. But we have to keep in mind that the fact that it was executed technically does not mean that it had the effects that we intended. And you saw that with General Caine. He described two very interesting things. The first is that the United States has been developing the GBU-57 to specifically attack this target for 15 years, and that they targeted two weak points that had been identified over the years. These were ventilation shafts. The weapons struck where they were supposed to strike, and General Caine made the point that all the weapons functioned exactly as they had been intended to do, but he stopped before he made any assessment about what the effect was. He said that the Department of Defense does not grade its own homework, that the battle damage assessment would have to be done by the intelligence community. And there you see a lot more hesitation. That is moving towards a severely damaged assessment of the entire Iranian nuclear program, rather than this particular strike and using the word obliterated.
And again, certainly with the acknowledgement and recognition that these pilots who undertook this very dangerous mission, in fact, performed admirably well, and did exactly what they were trained to do, proving that they are simply the best. But the secretary also indicated this was one of the most complex military operations in American history. And I don't know, I wonder if General Eisenhower in his grave would feel that way after D-Day or even the raid to kill Osama bin Laden. Again, not to grade military operations, but again, the hyperbole in the language that is often used by Trump administration officials lends itself to these comparisons that they themselves make. And though they provided a lot of information about how the attack was done, it doesn't strike me that the kind of language that they're using around it sort of lives up to the billing.
Well, on the political side, they are clearly using, exaggerated and expressive language. It's important to keep an eye on what the intelligence community and what the military is saying, because they are not willing to do that. In fact, General Caine was asked whether he was being pressured to change his views, and he said no, he was expressing his personal views. So I think that we do get some insights into maybe a more objective assessment, recognizing that the politicals, are political and therefore portray the events in very descriptive and partisan language.
It's an interesting point. But at the end of the day, sir, this operation, whether it succeeded in obliterating, as the president says, Iran's nuclear facilities, or just set them back so that they understand that the United States and her allies mean business, that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, even if the intelligence suggests that they were only set back a few months or a few years, that they do not undertake the enrichment of that uranium because they know what the consequences would be if they do. Isn't that ultimately the most important thing?
Well, it is. I think there are two important things to take away. One is that the program has been set back, and Iran now faces a choice about whether they will rebuild it, which will take billions of dollars, and will subject them to the risk that there might be future strikes that would take out any rebuilt facilities. They may decide that it's not worth it, that they will make a deal. The Iraqis made that decision when the Israelis took out the Osiris nuclear reactor. They did not rebuild the program. And the same with the Syrians when they lost their program. The other thing to keep in mind is the enriched uranium itself. It's believed that they had not enriched it to weapons grade. And if that's true, then its location is important. But what's really important is that they don't have the ability to further enrich it and to produce additional material.
Got it. All right. Retired Marine Colonel Mark Cancian, thank you, sir. Appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me on the show.